If you see me looking down here, that's because my phone is here with the script. Hey everyone, it's me, Alyssa. I also go by Lyss or Alsira, whichever's okay. I know I haven't posted in some time, and I apologize for that. I've been meaning to post more, but I've been preoccupied with writing the second draft to my novel and finish up the first draft of my third poetry book, looking for a job, all the other stuff. And I will be on vacation on the 22nd up until the 28th of July, and then from the 29th of July up until maybe the third week of August, I'll be available. Anyways, for this video, we will be talking about the books I've read so far, more specifically my favorite reads from each month. So I've done this before for 2024, I believe, and 2025. And so this month, this video will be just the first 6 months. So it'll be from January to June. I'll be putting up some stats from Storygraph, and there'll be books read and pages read. And I'll also be comparing them to previous years. The videos that I've done before like this will be linked down below. There will be books that you have read, and there will be books that you haven't heard of. There will even be books that touch your heart and soul in either a positive or negative way. These are my opinions, which are my own. You are free to recommend or express your own opinion in the comments down below. Be respectful, not assholes. A little intro about me. As I said before, I'm Alyssa. I apologize for the noise outside. I live on an intersection. I'm Alyssa. I'm a 27-year-old indie writer, and digital artist from New York, born and raised. I have a BA in English, considering creative writing, a minor in film video studies, and an MFA in creative writing. I have self-published 2 poetry books, Kaleidoscope and Death Throes, both available via Amazon and Barnes & Noble. Despite my accolades, I am not an expert in the English language, English literature, the craft of writing, nor the craft of film productions. Opinions expressed below are my own. I may talk about a book or an author either love or hate. This is not an attack on the books or authors I'll be mentioning. Be respectful, not assholes, like I said a million times before. With that being said, let's get on with the video. January. I'm using Storygraph for the stats because I love the way to format pages and books read, genres and all that. It's cool to me. So in January of 2026, I have read 3 books and 1,149 pages. Comparing this to last year, I've read 6 books and 1,831 pages. You know, it's not about the amount of books or pages you've read, it's about what you're absorbing in the content you're reading. Anyways, my favorite read for January was Night Film by Marisha Pessl. It was a bit slow and intense at times. There was a lot going on. I do like a bit of a cult following and mystery, but this felt a little all over the place. I didn't know where we were going everywhere and which way. But that just could be me, I have ADHD, I'll blame it on that. This was supposed to be my favorite read, so why am I criticizing it? Well, you can do that. You can love something and still criticize it. It's about the death of a reclusive filmmaker's daughter, and we dive into the rabbit hole of the filmmaker's cult following and whether or not she committed suicide or not. At the end, I remember just being so overwhelmed forgetting what I was reading, and I don't even think it was my ADHD. I think it just felt glacial slow. My honorable mention is New Places by H.R. Stoneback and Daniel Kempton. Dr. H.R. Stoneback, or Stoney as he was known, was a professor of mine for my undergrad. He was a very knowledgeable man, and he often spoke a lot about his past, and being kicked out of Rutgers twice, playing gigs as a 16-year-old in Nashville, and something about Bojangles. He knew a lot. He was also the archive editor of Richard Aldington, and I believe he met his daughter, Catherine. Fun fact, I got this copy from him, so that's cool. February, we kicked it up a notch to an astounding 8 books and 1,593 pages. I know it's a lot. I was reading ARCs, or Advanced Reader's Copies, and poetry collections, so that's the reason. Compared to last year, we have 4 books and 1,631 pages. I think at that time I was becoming sick with CVS, or cyclic vomiting syndrome, so I was very weak and unable to read as much as I could. And I probably didn't remember a lot. Getting back to this year, my favorite read for February is An Apple in Her Hand by the Hudson Valley Women's Writing Group. It's a collection of poems and prose written by the group, and one of those members was also a former professor of mine from undergrad, Jan Zlotnick-Schmidt, I believe. I think I've also gotten this copy from her, or I may have gotten it from a bookstore in town. It was really interesting. I found this book relatable, like, surprisingly. I think at that time I was just not into, like, non-fiction. It just felt a little too standoffish to me. Honorable mention is a name I mentioned before. It's The Death of a Hero by the mother-mucking Richard Aldington. This is one of the best anti-war novels I've read, and even though it was published 10 years before the Second World War, it still rings true. This was published, like, shortly after the First World War, and 10 years before the Second World War. So it was very interesting that they were calling it, the Great War. That's how you know it was published before the Second World War. And then, anytime you read, like, a book that talks about, like, war and such, like, especially like an anti-war novel, a lot of those conversations still ring true today. I've seen this with Ursula K. Le Guin's The Dispossessed, where they were talking about, like, politics and war and, like, genocide and colonization. And, like, I honestly thought this was published in, like, 2023 or something. March. Still keeping it high with 6 books and 1,735 pages. Compared to last year, we have 5 books and 1,789 pages. Keeping it kind of consistent with the pages. This year we had more poetry, a vampire YA novel that I honestly thought would be my fave, and a horrifying classic, but overall, one became a fave read of March, and that is I'll Fly Away by Rudy Francisco. In all honesty, I didn't have a lot of faves in this month, so it was a bit hard figuring out what's saying to be more. I chose Rudy's books because his poems spoke differently to the current issues at the time, and there was creativity involved. It wasn't like he was sticking to the one trend that worked. You gotta remember, Insta poetry. Like, I have a bit of a grudge with that. There was one thing I didn't like about his collection that was, like, blackout poetry. I understood why it exists, but I just don't like it personally. It doesn't feel that creative to me. Honorable mention is Sisters of the Lost Nation by Nick Medina. This surrounds the before and after of a young girl's disappearance and the lack of concern due to the fact that she is indigenous. MMIW stands for Murdered or Missing Indigenous Women and Children, sometimes. And it's a social justice movement that directly exposes the disparity and lack of concern of indigenous women and girls. I love the use of folk horror and dual timelines to work through this mystery, but I wish the main character, Anna, had more agency. I wish she was a little more vigilant in the search of her missing sister. That's all I'll say. April, maintaining a level with 6 books and 1,827 pages. Last April we had 4 books and 1,193 pages. Don't forget my illness. This April might be a record because for that month I read books written by women, only women that month. I'll update the video in case that changes. We had a lot of great reads this month. We had Ursula K. Le Guin, Otisha Moshfegh, Holly Black, and even Sydney Pham. However, one must prevail as a fave read. A Torch Against the Night by Sabaa Tahir. It is book 2 in the Embers and the Ashes series. And the ending of this book had me in a chokehold. We are not sparing anybody. I'm planning to continue the series. Unfortunately, my library has the remaining books on their shelves. Of course, we have an honorable mention, and she rightfully deserved it. It was a close call. Honorable mention, The Dispossessed by Ursula K. Le Guin. I talked about this earlier, about Richard Aldington. And what I love about Ursula's work is how gender neutral. She keeps her characters and language. She doesn't get all touchy about it, or even enforces the binary to her characters. I know I'm speaking in present tense, but when she died in 2018, I apologize. May. 5 books, 2,063 pages. Last year, 5 books, 2,112 pages. Okay, let me just say this. Storygraph, like, for each month in Storygraph, they record, like, how many books you finished. But, like, they don't, like... But usually for pages, they record the ones you didn't... But, like, for pages, though, it's a little different, because they'll record how many pages you read for each day. But it's not necessarily the amount of... It's not necessarily, like, proportionate to the amount of books you finished in that month, if you get what I mean. Like, let's say you're reading a book at the end of May, right? But May has ended, but you haven't finished the book yet. You got, like, 2 chapters left, right? And then you finish it in June. It counts for June, but not for May. So the amount of pages you read for that book in May, it counts for that month. But it only counts the little bit you read in June. If you understand what I'm saying. We're about even on that one for May stats. Had a big read. Had some small reads. Had some fun reads. Our favorite read of this for May 2026. Pieces of a Song by Diane de Prima. A lesser-heard voice in the Beat generation, which occurred after World War II. Diane writes about her relationship with men and women, the politically and or racially charged events at that time, and misogyny she faced as a woman. God forbid a woman speaks her mind. I do love some lines from her, like, it hurts to be murdered. Honorable mention is The Great Alone by Kristin Hannah. I was gifted this book. It's a chunker, it's a big book. And I do love me some big books. It was a bit trigger me at first because it involves domestic violence and murder and things I don't like to talk about unless I'm writing in my characters. This book felt like a kind of movie you watch on Lifetime, but like back in the 90s, if you know what I mean. June, the final month in this video, we have 5 books and 1,888 pages. Last year, it was 5 books and 2,132 pages. Read some poetry, some YA, some arcs. I might do a video on all the poetry I read so far for this year. Watch out for that one. I might also do one for books I didn't like so much. Anyways, my favorite read for last month was Oathbound by Tracy Deonn. I've been dying to read this book since Bloodmark, and I've been thinking about what book 4 might be called. Although I love the series, I do have some criticisms. One, I know it's a fast-paced book, but we can slow it down a bit. Like, don't forget to flesh out characters a little more. And let's not forget about characters that matter, okay? Like, even minor characters can make a big difference. In Bloodmarked, I felt like the love triangle was too much in my face, and I'm not so used to romance reads, so that's on me. For Oathbound, I feel like the series is entering what I like to call tunnel vision. Like, we are so focused on the main plot surrounding the main character that we neglect to let other elements of the story develop. I feel like the ending was rushed, and we could have picked a better font, I'm just saying. Honorable mention, This Poison Heart by Kalynn Bayron. I apologize if I screwed that name up. I like this because we were set in upstate New York, and the main character is similar to Poison Ivy from the DC world. I do like the haunted manor element and the scavenger hunt, but I felt like the plot took a bit long to get going. Yes, I know it's a duology and this is book 2. This is just book 1. Book 2 is out in my library. I love learning about history and other cultures, and I love reading about New York that isn't what you see on a postcard or from a tourist's eyes. Trust me, I know it when I know it. That is all for this video. I already have a July update on Substack, and I'm working on another video. It'll be a bit interactive and fun if you like poetry. There's also another video I'm working on where I recommend books, so watch out for that one. Support me any way you can. Linktree is in my description. You can also commission art via Ko-Fi, or Ko-Fi, whatever you call it. buy my books. I'm also selling books that I've read on Pango Books, US only. I look forward to hearing your opinions and recommendations in the comments. I'll see you in my next video. Make sure to hydrate and be safe. Bye!